So the questions are, why is electronic transmission of results a big issue? How do we reconcile real-time transmission with Nigeria's unequal digital infrastructure without disenfranchising rural or conflict-prone areas? Shouldn't electoral reform focus more on punishment certainty for offenders and on new voting technologies? I guess tonight is Umar Kalgo, former Secretary, NBA Benin-Kebbi branch, also a public affairs analyst and policy advocate. Thank you very much for joining me on the program, Mr. Kalgo. Good to see you.
My pleasure.
Right. So anyone conversant with the Nigerian electoral system and process since 1999 would admit that the biggest challenge has been how to ensure the integrity of votes by INEC. And you know, some Nigerians believe real-time transmission of results is the only way to achieving this. For you, why does it matter more than almost any other electoral reform Nigeria has attempted?
I think the issue of electronic transmission is a vital issue. If you look at our election in Nigeria and the history of improvement of the election in Nigeria, technology has always been the bedrock of this development that we have, starting with the card reader, and which is a phenomenal change. But what is happening now is the same saga being played out again and again. The reason why I say this is you find the critical key players that are shaping the improvement in our election are the INEC, the National Assembly, and the courts. And you tend to find at every point in time, the fresh idea used to come from INEC. And now when it comes, it will be tried in our courts. Then you find the law is lagging behind. Then you find the National Assembly coming forward to provide the necessary law to ensure such achievements. That's what happened with the card reader when it comes. And in the phenomenal change we have again was the IREF in the last election. And it is the main issue during which the court decided. So you find ourselves like in 2016, when the Supreme Court said that the card reader is vital in authenticating voters, but cannot determine overvoting, as at that time, because it was not enshrined in the Electoral Act. Then the National Assembly moved forward to enshrine it. From then on, it becomes the card reader can identify, overvoting. So at this juncture now, in the last election, you find out the rules, regulations guiding the conduct of 2023 election was very explicit in the IREF mandatory transmission of election. But there is no, background for such transmission in the Electoral Act. And that's why the Supreme Court ordered that cannot be a reason for invalidating the election in the case of Atiku versus Tinubu 2023. So we are in that axis where Nigerians are looking a replica of what happened back regarding the card reader, for the National Assembly to move forward and bridge this lacuna. I can assure you that I participated in election petition. The IREF was not perfect, but even at that, it has exposed a lot of things. In the election that I was involved then, there was 79% non-compliance of the transmission. But the ones that are transmitted, you can see the differences. Actually, a lot of irregularities when it comes to election happens at the collation centers. And that's why electronic transmission is very, very vital in those lapses.
All right. Well said, Mr. Kalgo, but let's face reality here. Does it not look like Nigerians, or as a nation, we're over-romanticizing technology as a cure for electoral fraud, especially when manipulation often occurs before voting day? Party primaries is there. Voter suppression is a challenge, an alleged security compromise. So what is it about real-time electronic transmission?
You see, the problems with our election are in lateral levels. Yes, there are ones that have to do with ethics and also sincerity of the voters, like voter buy-in and what have you. But that will not take us having a system that will ensure proper counting. If we have proper counting, we have really made an advancement. So you can see it is a lateral thing that we are pursuing. No doubt about that, because really, when it comes to voter buy-in, corruption, all these are things that come into play. But this technology have a way of catching up with some of these things. Just the way from the moment card reader came in, you can see the level and records of voting has dramatically changed in Nigeria. Before, the difference between the registered voters and the people who voted is very, very minimal. But now hardly you find registered voters and the actual voting taking even 50% of the registered voters. So I think Nigerians are used to having these phenomenal changes when it comes to election. And they will romanticize having this to further fortify our democracy. And at this juncture,
quickly, Mr. Kalgo, so if real-time transmission is the only way, how do we then explain credible elections in jurisdiction that do not rely on it, but are emphasizing post-election audit and severe sanctions?
You see, if you look at countries with the most progressive elections, look at the time limits of when the results come. They were achieved because of proper and effective election. Hardly, when you talk of the US, despite how large it is, except in times when you have them, within 24 hours you have the results, even less than that. And you see, the election is supposed to happen in a transparent manner where even the parties can collect, so that you find in all developed democracies, before even the official result comes, the one who do this congratulates the leading one, because it is so transparent and everyone can follow. Well, that's what Nigerians are aiming to. But what we have with what the Senate is saying is going back to what happened with the card reader. Even if INEC made regulations for the conduct of election comes 2027, which says there should be electronic transmission, then the Electoral Act will supersede the regulation and it cannot stand. So that's what we are saying. What we have now, INEC is not at liberty unless if our courts have gone or have departed from their way of interpreting regulations and principal acts in Nigeria.
So if real-time transmission is adopted and still fails to deliver what we've always longed for, which is credible elections, what should Nigerians demand next? And do you think we're really prepared for that conversation?
Look, what is happening, I think what we obtain miss is that when we said real-time transmission, it is not an independent form of work. Rather, the handwritten and hard copies of what you have are the things that are translated. You always have a way to fall back and check it out, even if there are some lapses in it. Because in IREF, what the polling units officials are expected is they should snap and send the picture of that EC8 that they have filled. And I can assure you, with the one I did, which have only less than 79% non-compliance, 79%, but we have seen the difference in what is sent and what was taken during the collation. So it does not take away from the hard copies that we have, which are transmitted. It only gives us a greater check and balance.
So let me ask you this direct question, Mr. Kalgo. Is it practicable to transmit results real time because the emphasis is real time across over 170,000 registered polling units across this country. Is it practicable?
It is practicable. Look, we are talking of transparency, even as it is now. Unless the regulation that is coming out scrap what we have under IREF, still they are mandated to do that. It is only that it does not carry that balance of weight of law. I think if it is retained so that people can use it, at least people can. But when you look at something, you can see fault, but you cannot use it in court. It becomes, it becomes valueless. So I think the way we need to look at it is that real-time transmission is transmission of what you have on the ground on longhand or records on hard copies. It's not something different.
All right, Mr. Kalgo, let's go on a break. Forward to was a legal backing for compulsory real-time electronic transmission of election results. Nigerians are made to believe the Senate rejected that, but the Senate says we only worked with what was already available to us. Does this in any way reopen debates about transparency? Former Secretary NBA Benin Kebbi Branch, Umar Kalgo, has been helping us with some clarifications about whether or not electronic transmission of results is what Nigeria needs to achieve an electoral integrity. Thank you very much for staying with us on the program, Mr. Kalgo. So let's look at other amendments to the Electoral Act. As we speak, the Senate has officially replaced smart card readers with a bimodal voter accreditation system. If you are to speak from a legal and operational standpoint, does this change address any past concerns about electoral transparency?
BVAS is an advancement to card reader, actually. And this is what we are talking about. All the time you find the technology taking the first leap before you find legal backing to put it proper in place. So I think it is a commendable thing that BVAS is actually captured by the provisions of the law. It only empowers, authentication of voters prior to voting. I think it's a commendable thing in that regard.
But given the BVAS's dual role, it works for accreditation and also voting. Does this in any way consolidate power? In a way that increases or perhaps decreases the risk of technical manipulation? Are there adequate legal safeguards in place to challenge BVAS results if disputes arise?
I think there would be, because at all times you find that election is not the way we conduct it. What happened at the polling station is...
Mr. Kalgo, there would be or there should be.
What I'm saying, what normally happened at the election, you see, the authentication there are some intrusions which would be very, very difficult, considering how the system of the BVAS is an exclusive one. It's not an open-ended thing. Though in technology, you always have that degree of risk. But I think the way it is created, it is very, very, very hard to manipulate. And I believe you have a fallback to authenticate with what we have on the papers, the ballots, and other hard copies of election materials we have.
But what is the liability of INEC under the Electoral Act? Is BVAS, for instance, malfunctions, prevents voters from being accredited? What is the liability of INEC?
Well, you see, liability, the duty of INEC is to ensure that a credible, free and fair election is conducted. Looking at the great, massive nature of this country, you can find hitches here and then. And INEC, in its position, you see, if what happened, has to do with a local election, that the tinkering or the glitch cannot provide a clear winner. There is always the opportunity of rerun to ensure that elections were conducted. But by and large, you tend to find in larger constituencies for governors and what have you, these, these short comings in here and then do not amount in a way to endanger the general election. So I think INEC have a lot of mechanism to deal with such kind of thing. It is not a stricto sensu thing that will immediately invalidate election automatically when you have some glitches here and there.
But is there a tendency to invalidate election results? And do you think our legal framework can handle that?
Yes, it is. I mean, it is very, very apparent. I know in the last election, you will find some polling units where the beavers have malfunctioned. And if even when counting, when that polling unit, the span of votes between the winners is not greater, or it cannot be established without that polling unit, you find inconclusive elections, and that's why you have them. At times they happen due to glitches of these technological errors, or sometimes even physical and other things can be the reason why such things can happen. I think the way we look at it, it is not tying it down to that particular apparatus that will determine what will happen. But all the same, I think it is not a stricto sensu that once it malfunctions, then we are going, unless it happens on a very, very large scale, which is not likely.
Okay then. So, how then do you also interpret the Senate rejecting electronically generated voter identification or keeping the PVC as the sole mandatory ID?
Sincerely, I'm worried. The reason I'm worried is that, initially I told you all the improvements we have in the electoral process, you find it happening from typewriters. The INEC, especially when you have a genius, chairman, and on the other hand, you have the National Assembly and the court. In this triangular cycle, the National Assembly have played the greater role in making sure that this advancement come to stay, whether it is the card reader and now with the beavers, but now we are having a fallback when it's come to IREF. So I think, well, I don't know whether after the committee, the conciliation, maybe the National Assembly will continue to hold the torch at the front burner in leading advancement in our electoral process. Maybe the court will take over now, but I know the ties of the chairman or INEC in particular are tight the way it is now.
So, Mr. Kalgo, if we're keeping PVC as the sole mandatory ID, are there situations where the court could interpret this as a violation of constitutional rights, a citizen's constitutional right to vote if alternative verification is unavailable?
To me, I think PVC can remain the only way of authenticating, because after all, the duty to conduct free and fair election is vested in INEC. And INEC have these, it has collated this voters PVC, and it is open to all. Anybody who have not had access to voters card would have a reason to complain and say that his rights have been violated. But if there is nothing hindering him, but someone just, refused to acquire a PVC and now said he will use other identification means to vote, I think it doesn't really necessarily say that he has been denied that right. Well, it is a commendable thing to see that the databases we have of our electoral PVC and that of national identity card, if they can seamlessly be tied together, it will help. But one thing to understand is that while the PVC is for citizens only and who are of age to vote, that the other way, when you look at national identification, even minors, as it is now, are being enrolled therein. So you see the databases are not of the same category and criteria. Maybe that's why INEC is keeping close to their heart the database which they have, and they can boost and rely, this is what we have, the biodata authenticated. So I don't see anything in regard.
I mean, I hear you, Mr. Kalgo, but there are divided submissions on this. There are those who are saying if we're adopting electronic IDs alongside PVCs, it would create a legally safer and more flexible system for both voters and INEC. Do you agree?
Well, electronic ID in what sense? If you are saying that electronic ID as PVC, well, yes, I can reason with that. But if you are bringing another alternative like the national identification card, which is a database not under the custody of INEC, who has this duty to conduct election, well, in that regard, I don't think I say no to that.
All right, let's look at other amendments. There is a revised election timelines. The Senate approved significant reductions to administrative timelines. Notice of election, that's clause 28, reduced from 360 days to 180 days before the election date. We also have submission of candidates, that's clause 29, reduced from 180 days to 90 days before the general election. We're also looking at penalties for PVC offenses, that's clause 22. Let's take it one after another, Mr. Kalgo. Given Nigeria's history of pre-election litigation, do you think compressing these timelines reduce dispute? Because I've heard people say this would, simply shift them closer to election day. Are we not increasing the risk of courts determining candidates during campaigns rather than before them? What's your take?
Well, my take is that, restricting these timelines endanger one of the problems you alluded to, which is intra-party democracy, which this larger time span we have already, I think they help us in strengthening the intra-party democracy, where you have this crisscrossing, cross-carpeting of candidates from one party to another. And I think we tried in the last Electoral Act to regulate the issue of fairness in intra-party democracy, to instill it more, preventing candidates to do more than one primary. Well, I'm not happy with the restriction of these times, because I believe it will endanger the intra-party democracy and give politicians more time closer to election to indulge in this crisscrossing, party changing, and what have you. I would love to see in Nigeria something similar to what is lacking in the world of football, where you have the window period where you can make transfers before going into the real matches. So I think when you now bridge the time, making it that window gap of crisscrossing and what have you is now restricted. Before, you have 180 days where nobody, after that, everyone have already submitted his candidates 180 days to election. We are static, we are certain, we know what we are doing, but now it's just 90 days. So it only gives room for that maneuver that we do complain about.
So apart from the burden it will put on the courts and whether or not it would, open more doors for politicians to manipulate the system, is INEC institutionally prepared, whether administratively or technology-wise, to operate under these tighter windows without compromising due process?
I think it is even easier for INEC to be able to do that. But where the problem will rise is this pre-election matters.
Okay.
How can they be decided within constricted time? I think when we have those larger times, the idea is to ensure that we deal with all these pre-election matters, deal with them properly before going into the post-election era after election. So I think the courts will have a lot of, congestion when the timelines are so close in this regard. So it is going to be difficult for INEC, but more so for the judiciary.
All right. The Senate also rejected a proposed 10-year prison sentence for buying and selling PVCs. We're retaining 2 years, but increasing the fine to 5 million naira. From a deterrence theory standpoint, Mr. Kalgo, is this proportionate?
Well, for me, the punishment, at times we think that the degree of punishment is what matters. For me, I'm looking at convictions.
Okay.
Even if they are lesser, let's have conviction first to see how far they are being deterrent before now we move to having, greater sentences and greater punitive measures if we have failed with this one. So to me, I think we should focus more in ensuring that these malpractices are prosecuted and convictions are recorded. You see, when you look at our election history and you look at what we have, I think only in the last election that you have some of the cases actually going to court with regards to malpractices. So I think we need to record these prosecutions far better. So let's not, be more concerned about.
So prosecutions by who, Mr. Kalgo? I mean, in all sense, can the judiciary and electoral bodies like INEC specifically hold violators accountable?
I think
because the question has always been who should prosecute.
Yeah, that's another area because as things stand now, some are saying that INEC should have that power. But what we have, provided that there are offenses, our law enforcement agencies have every reason to do that, and even INEC can participate. What I'm just trying to say is, I think it's not going to be a problem in trying to identify this because election is very, very competitive. The losers will always try to see that those who are guilty or culpable in that sense are brought to book. So it's just that let's have a clearer procedure. That's what I'm saying, that we think out of box of having a very elaborate way of bringing these offenders to court and ensuring that they are, brought to book is more important than the degree of punishment we are talking about, which is there is no even machinery proper to get people who are culpable and be brought to book.
All right. Just to round off this conversation about Electoral Act amendments, about a month ago, the Senate called for a major shift in electoral jurisprudence. We heard the Senate President, Senator Akpabio, saying the burden of proof in election petitions should rest on INEC rather than candidates. What do you make of this one, and what challenges might arise if INEC becomes the primary bearer of proof in post-election litigation?
I think that's how it's supposed to be, because after all, that duty is on INEC. And now what you have is you find INEC standing by and not being bring to stand for the duty that is wholly vested in it and now being just given to a private person. So that's why a lot of the irregularities will pass under the carpet, because INEC is the custodian of these records. And when it is the one that is liable, so even the records can speak for themselves. I remember in the last, in the Electoral Act 2022, there was a section 137, because of the difficulty for a private person to, to establish irregularity against another candidate. It's not easy. So that section was clear that wherever there is manifest inconsistency on a record, no need for oral evidence. However, when this section interpretation get to the courts, that did not stand. The courts emphasizes that oral evidence is very, very vital. So if the duty is on INEC, I think this operation of this section will be brought to fruition.
Mr. Kalgo, if you say the duty should be on INEC, are you not bothered that perhaps political actors could exploit this change to overwhelm INEC with litigation or use it to delay electoral outcomes? Does that not bother you?
Is there any election petition that INEC is not included?
Part of, okay. But I'm emphasizing overwhelming, using it to overwhelm INEC this time, if this passes.
I don't think so. I think the election petition procedure is not an easy one. It is also very, very costly. And everyone knows that it is not easy to establish. But I think even the way things are, it's just that the way the courts are looking at it. But ideally and principally, that's how it's supposed to be. And for that reason, you find that if you file any election petition without INEC, then you are doing nothing, because you cannot file it without getting the body who is responsible in conduct of the election being a party, an active one in that.
Okay, so in all of this brouhaha, those saying, oh, we want real-time transmission of election results, what advice would you give to the Senate as the Red Chamber reconvenes tomorrow?
Well, the advice I will give to the Senate is they should reason and maintain their mantle. Let them not relegate the National Assembly in the pivotal role it has been playing in advancing improvement in our electoral process. If they did not do that, I think it will be a setback for the National Assembly.
All right. Quickly, let me take you upon another very important conversation. About a month ago, the president directed all the state governors to comply fully with the recent Supreme Court judgment on local government financial autonomy. And the president was insisting that statutory funds must be released directly to councils without interference. First, what's your take on this? And second, does this not expose a deeper crisis of constitutional obedience amongst our governors?
As a lawyer, and I think this nation owes it to the Supreme Court to obey the law as it is, because that's how it's supposed to be. We are talking of a judgment of the Supreme Court. Nobody has the liberty to now have thought and opinion on how to go about it. It is a judgment and it should be implemented. I think what the president is saying is not option, but it's something that the governors are duty bound to do. And I believe Nigerians are happy for us to have that. After all, will the governors be happy if their autonomy now is being taken by the federal government?
Okay, just to be fair on them, Mr. Kalgo, just a few of them have complied. The majority have not. But if compliance fails again, I mean, the president has spoken and Nigerians are watching. If compliance fails again, does that confirm that Nigeria's constitutional design for local government is fundamentally unworkable?
I will not say it is unworkable.
Okay.
The judgment of the court is very explicit. I believe the president can bring them around to obey fully, because all the powers necessary to achieve that were given to him in that judgment. It's just a matter of the political will. So I think Mr. President is persuading the governors.
So, Mr. Kalgo, I'm confused here. In one breath, you're saying the president would, typically beg them or persuade them. In another breath, you're talking about political will. Where is the balance?
The balance is that if you remember clearly that judgment, the president is given power to even withhold the, allocation of states who failed to comply. And at one point, Mr. President threatened to directly credited, accounts of this local government. Although, even that, there was some ingenious way developed by the governors to usurp that. But all the same, I'm saying, since we have a Supreme Court judgment that is so explicit, Mr. President have every interest to get the governors follow it voluntarily, I think, politically for his position. But with that, even being him the way we know him, if everything he intends to do, he is going after it with every vigor, I think why not implement and take the bull by the horn since you have the powers? Sorry to be so blunt.
You know, when you ask the governors, oh, why the Supreme Court has spoken, why is Deterrence a challenge? And you hear them say, oh, we don't want them to misuse the funds. How then do we prevent local government autonomy from simply shifting corruption from state capitals to local council headquarters? Mr. Kalgo.
We already have corruption. And I think the local people, the local government, will better fight corruption if their immediate leaders are the ones they can see them doing it. That's how. But now when it is the governors, not even their chairman. So I think corruption is something that we correct with the will, and if it is closer to the people, I think that disease, that should not be an excuse for not giving our local government their allocation. I believe people will rise up and hold them accountable, especially when it is close to. You can see what is happening. But now it is happening very, very far from the electorates in the local governments. Even the chairmen are out of the ballgame.
But can the Constitution also provide accountability mechanisms at the local level, just to justify full fiscal independence?
I believe it is there. The local governments, it is a tier. You have the the legislatures at that level. It is a council. You have the councillors and the chairman. So it is a mini government for the people. And unless it starts operating, you see, the reality of human beings is that you experiment, you crawl, you grow. That's how it happens. But when you do not allow them to even, experiment and take responsibility for fear of them not to, so then when should they grow and develop these mechanisms of check and balances we are talking about?
All right, sadly we're out of time. I wanted to take you up on fiscal federalism and especially what it means in Nigeria's constitutional context. But sadly we're out of time, but I'm sure we'll continue that conversation some other time. But of course, from here, we'll continue to monitor what comes out of the Red Chamber tomorrow. Thank you so much for speaking with us tonight. Umar Kalgo, former Secretary, NBA, Public Affairs Analyst, Policy Advocate. Thank you so much for your time, sir. Please have a great evening.
My pleasure, Jimoki. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for watching. That marks the end of today's episode of Politics Tonight. But